The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So, good morning everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me and hopefully there's no sound issues. We do occasionally have a problem when these sessions get started. So if for any reason you can't hear us, please do let us know. Welcome aboard to this webinar this morning, and thank you all for taking the time to join and to attend it. My name is David Rawle. I work for Byte Security Partnerships, and with me is Chris Jones from Forcepoint. So without further ado, we'll click through and get on with showing this webinar, which we're running on bridging the Office 365 security gap, specifically what Forcepoint can do to help you with that. As I said, my name is David Rawle. I'm the Technical Director here at Byte Security Partnerships. With me is Chris Jones, one of the Senior SEs from Forcepoint, and he'll be doing the bulk of the webinar, it has to be said. I'm just here to do the intro bit. And on that line, I do just want to go through just a little bit for any of you that are new to Byte Security Partnerships or don't know anything about it. So I've just got a couple of slides to show you on that. I'll keep them as short as I can. So who are we? Well, as I said, we are Byte Security Partnerships, part of the Bytes Group here in the UK. There's two sides to the business, Byte Software Services and Byte Security Partnerships. Byte Software Services are a Microsoft reseller, biggest Microsoft LAR in the country. And us here at Byte Security Partnerships are effectively still an independent security reseller, value-added reseller, with a focus purely on IT security and some top-level partnerships with people like Forcepoint, Checkpoint, etc. In terms of what we do. We've been around since 2000. We were formed. I'm slightly ashamed to say that I was the first technical person that ever worked for this business, and I've been here ever since. Really, we focus on all the normal areas that any IT security VAR here in the UK focuses on. What's very different about us, though, is our support desk and how we provide our telephone support to our customers and our philosophy, really, to what we do. So the important thing here is it's direct-to-engineer support. We do not have any first line. We don't have any scripts. We don't have any canned responses on our support desk. The most likely canned response you're going to get back when you do log a ticket with us is, please can we do a remote session to look at that. What that means is when you've got an issue on your network with your IT security infrastructure and you have a problem with it, when you call into us, rather than just getting a series of questions and we'll call you back shortly, you get through to somebody straight away who can actually help you with the problem and actively wants to engage with you and work with you on the problem. And that's really, really important for yourselves with IT security, you know, branching out all the time, not just in terms of being IT security infrastructure, but also becoming, you know, firewalls and things like that, a fundamental part of your network infrastructure. You know, it's incredibly important. You know, as I said, a lot of what we offer is very standard in the marketplace, but it's that element in terms of both the support stuff and also our ability and preparedness, if you like, to be honest about the marketplace and the industry that really mark us out. Some of you will know that I come in quite often and do meetings with customers and with end users, and I'm always very, very honest about what we find other people are doing, what we're finding is working, what we're finding is not working, and you know, we really are prepared to go the extra mile to show you as our end users, you know, the direction you should be moving in, etc., etc. You know, from an account management point of view, regular account reviews, you know, if you've got an account manager, hopefully you'll be seeing them relatively regularly. We do webinars, a lot of this kind of stuff. The account managers tend to stay as consistent as we can possibly make them. And we do run a whole load of events, security conferences, seminars, things like that, as well as I already mentioned strategy days where myself and the account manager or one of our senior guys in the account manager will come in. We do actually have a couple of events coming up throughout October. We'll be at IP Expo for any of you registered for that, and we have an invite going out for that shortly. We're also running an event towards the end of October at the Ritz where we will be running a sort of a mini IP Expo with a few vendors there, one of which will be Forcepoint. Some of our key customers, just to give you an idea, I'll let this build and I'll spin through it fairly quickly so Chris doesn't fall asleep before I hand over to him, but just to give you an idea of some of the names that we're engaged with and that we're doing IT security for, and also that the wider group is engaged with. So, what are we here to actually talk about today? Well, we're here to talk about Office 365. We're here to talk about security in Office 365. And I think, you know, we're really starting to see this as a little bit of a tipping point here at Byte Security Partnerships. You know, a lot of the conversations we're having has gone from real early adopters using Office 365 to actually, you know, it's starting to be a definitive move, at the very least a hybrid infrastructure with people running hybrid Exchange with it partly in Office 365 and partly on-premise. And obviously with that convenience and scalability and that ease of use that is giving to people, there are security concerns. And if we're being brutally honest, the whole IT security industry as a whole is only really just catching up with the move into this space and in the way that people are now working and the way that businesses want to work. And in our opinion, the work that Forcepoint have done with Office 365 and the plugins that Forcepoint have got for Office 365 really mark them out as being one of the real leaders in this space. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to Chris to actually go through what Forcepoint can do with 365. So Chris, over to you. I'll just flick you across to be the presenter.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So now I'll just get my screen adjusted and ready to go. So hopefully you can all see my screen now and everything is being shared properly. I think before I get into it, I'd really like to echo everything that David's just said about Office 365 and its kind of force in the market. I've been with Forcepoint in its various iterations for almost as long as Dave's been at Byte Security Partnership now. I've been here for 12 years. So I've seen a lot of changes over the years. I started off in what is the cloud wing of our business, and I remember in my earlier days in the organisation really much having to sell the whole concept of cloud to organisations. Everyone was very much focused on their internal infrastructure. So to see Office 365 as a cloud service really take off is very good for me, because it's what I spent my career working on. But certainly as an organisation with Forcepoint, it's something that we see far more. Over the last 2, 3, 4 years, Office 365 has been coming up more and more in conversations from people who are considering it, say 3 years ago, to people who are actively using it now. But I'm definitely finding that it's a sliding scale. People are still in investigatory stances at the moment. And what I've found at Forcepoint is it's become a huge topic of conversation. To put some context around this, every year we have an annual sales kickoff where all of the sales and marketing and sales engineers from all over the world meet up for 3 or 4 days to go through everything that is new within Forcepoint, all the changes, what we've got coming, and to help us set the scene. And for the last 2 years, I would say that I've heard the term Office 365 more than I've heard the term Forcepoint or web security, things that we've always been very famous for. It is such a huge part of what we will be doing and how we'll be interacting that we can't escape it, and it's something that we are consistently talking about. So I think before I wanted to get into some of the specifics around Office 365, what it does, how it works with us, I wanted to help set the scene in the same way that Dave did with the Byte Security Partnership side of things. I wanted to do that with Forcepoint, because not everyone on the call will be immediately familiar with Forcepoint, as we are essentially a new organisation. We formed in January of this year, but we've come from 3 other organisations which I suspect all of you will have come across in some shape or form. The large bulk of the organisations come from what was WebSense, so myself is included in that group. So I've been here for 12 years now from the WebSense side of the business. Certainly we were very well known in the web security market, but also email security, data loss prevention, data theft prevention, and big in cloud services and hybrid solutions. I think it gives us a very good perspective on what we're seeing now with Office 365, because it's a very similar route to what we had. Another significant arm of our business came from Raytheon. This is an organisation that people are less likely to have heard of, but still certain people will have come across them. They're a defense contractor based in the US, probably one of the larger, wealthier organizations in the world. And of course, in their line of business, they were constantly going to be attacked with some really advanced malware and threats and all of these sorts of things. And also they would need to have a very strong stance around data and classification and threat prevention. They had part of their organization called Raytheon Cyber Products. All of the technology from Raytheon Cyber Products was developed for Raytheon to help protect them. That technology has now come into the Forcepoint stable, so we've got access to all of this. But very importantly, access to all of the intelligence that Raytheon were gathering about the threats that they were targeted and organizations that they work with were targeted. And finally, the last addition to this was the StoneSoft firewall technology that was previously owned by McAfee. So this is the StoneSoft and the Sidewinder firewalling capabilities. Very strong firewalls and really good evasion prevention techniques and some great scalability within their solution. So all of this has come together to be Forcepoint as a brand. So there's quite a lot of technologies that we have within our stable. It's not just the classic WebSense side of things. Of course, that's probably where a lot of people are going to know us from, but there's a lot more to what we do. So moving now on to the actual subject of what we're here to talk about, the Office 365 capabilities. As I said, my background is in cloud, so it's great for me to suddenly see organizations adopting these cloud technologies, because I've been talking about them as a concept for over a decade now. But really, what Office 365 is an extension of your infrastructure, an extension of your network, and taking these capabilities that were previously hosted and managed internally and moving those out to make everything a lot more collaborative. When people say Office 365, I find every customer that I speak to has got something different in mind when they are discussing this. For some, it's all about all the SharePoint files that they are now moving out to Office 365. For others, it's about communication technologies and tools. Probably the bigger chunk of people, when they say Office 365, they actually mean hosted Exchange. Because of course, there's a lot of different applications and options within that Office 365 cloud, and people will be using various different parts of it. And will be adopting them at various speeds based on what is right for their business. But it comes down to this whole concept of collaboration, opening everything up so that regardless of your location, you're able to access it, and taking off some of the strain from internal resources by moving this up into the cloud. And of course, cloud's a very big buzzword for a lot of organizations. It makes a lot of sense. And I thought it'd be nice to show you what one of these clouds look like. If you look carefully, you can probably see some of the silver lining on this cloud. So what we've got here actually is one of the Office 365 data centers in Dublin. Because of course we talk about cloud, and for a lot of people who aren't quite so technically familiar with all of this, they're going to struggle to picture what it looks like. But it is infrastructure just like anything else. And when we talk about cloud, we are just talking about someone else's infrastructure. Now, the fact that this infrastructure has been built with one particular purpose, that it's been built to handle all of those things, that it's optimized, that a lot of the patching and updating and backups and all of that stuff that would normally be potentially difficult to manage internally is done for you, that's the real advantage. But of course, when it's in someone else's infrastructure, we have some security challenges that are going to need to be addressed. And that's what I hope to cover today, to look at what those security challenges might be, because of course they vary from organization to organization, and what we at Forcepoint can offer to cover those. So this is a lovely diagram because it's so idealistic. What we have is, in the past, everything was internal. It was hidden behind your firewall and your proxies and all of that, and the internet was on the other side, nice and safe and secure and predictable. And then we have this idealized version of the present, where we have certain things going on in the cloud, public and private clouds, storage device applications potentially all over the place, and a very big mixture of secure gateways, next-gen firewalls and capabilities like that going on in that medium zone. And of course this is as a hybrid functionality. The reality is it's not quite like this. Not everyone was operating in that same way in the past, and certainly in my experience, the vast majority of customers aren't looking quite like this diagram shows for the present. It tends to be somewhere in the middle. You could almost look at this as a sliding scale between what you have on the left-hand side, fairly rigid and predictable infrastructure, to this much more fluid approach that we are all moving towards. But whether you are at this point of the present that we can see here, or whether you're moving towards it, I think most people would agree that that is probably where they're looking to end up, and it might take them a year or 5 years or longer to get there. But at some point in our careers, we're all going to see this environment. This is what we're going to be dealing with. The big question mark, of course, is when our infrastructure is so spread out, when we have lots of things in lots of different locations, how do we protect that? How do we make it secure? And also, what do we need to secure? What are the things that we would potentially miss? So with Office 365, there's a number of packages that people can and will buy into, and of course they've all got those monthly costs, so they're certainly not cheap to adopt. Some good value case within there, but you do need to go for the one that is most suitable to you. And being that there are some security implications and options included within them, it may be worth you considering whether you want to go for the more expensive bundles that have some of those capabilities, or whether you're actually going to cover that elsewhere, because of the, it can be more effective at using it outside of the Office 365 approach. So I'm not going to go through everything that is on here, because you'll have seen all this, and I'm certainly not a salesperson for Microsoft or Office 365, but I wanted to highlight a couple of parts that are available in the pricier packages, things like rights management, data loss prevention, encryption. And therefore you will have available to you. Whether they are necessarily worth you using, or whether, as I mentioned a moment ago, is worth you taking those same sorts of capabilities through third-party technologies, that's probably for you to decide. Hopefully I'll give you some information and some details around what those might be, and some food for thought. So there inevitably is going to be a security gap in Office 365. It's new, it's developing, and it will be around for a long time. But what are those things that you need to be aware of? What do you need to consider when you're speccing this out, when you're planning for the future, and when you're looking at your end of year budgets and thinking, how do we need to allocate this moving forward? The first one to talk about is the security efficacy. Now, there's a lot of approaches as to how we can approach this. There's, of course, the security of the actual servers and the threat detection you have on there. And there's also things like I expect this is the more common one that comes up, the efficacy of the scanning on the hosted exchange services. Because I believe with all of the contracts there is I say free, but of course you are paying for it essentially in that subscription. There's this element of scanning that is included for all of the email that is coming in to remove it for spam, and to remove it and to remove viruses from that. Now this is a very, very difficult one to quantify, because threats and spam and all of those are going to differ and vary from organisation to organisation. What we have seen is quite a reasonable number of customers who have left our solution and competitors' solutions as well. We hear this anecdotally as well, to take on the security capabilities that you use in Office 365. But we've seen quite a good chunk of those people actually come back, and the reason every single time is that the security analytics weren't as good as they were expecting. More spam was getting through to organisations, and of course people aren't used to receiving spam if they've been using a high-end solution like ours. And viruses were also getting through. And the reality is there's going to be a number of reasons for this. Now, for us, spam and threat protection is our core business. This is what we focus on, and this is where we make our money. So we have a huge vested interest in doing that well and being at the top of our game there. Whereas, of course, with Microsoft, it is a bolt-on feature. They're not expressly getting money for doing that. So whilst they want to have a service that is good, is it going to be in the same realms of organizations that focus on that? Most likely not. We are doing some analysis to try and get some specific results. We don't have anything specific to show you on this presentation because for various reasons, but of course it doesn't take a lot to kind of arrive at this conclusion. It's the same sort of detection that you would be getting on the free Hotmail accounts that would be out there. I certainly wouldn't have considered taking that detection and putting it as my corporate security strategy moving forward. And of course, Microsoft are not known specifically for being great in the security market. Certainly something that they do, but they are not a front runner. And then the final thing to consider here is with everybody potentially going to be using the same security statistics, are malware writers out there going to actively target that technology to work out what its weaknesses are? If a lot of people are using it, and a lot of people will be using it, it will not be difficult to test against it to work out what can and can't get through, and then take those examples and move them forward. The next gap within Office 365 is the infrastructure side of things. Now, I don't think I've met a customer yet that has fully moved everything off of their network into Office 365. Even the ones that were very early adopters have still got what I would classify as a hybrid infrastructure, even just on the Microsoft side. Once we start taking into account all of the other facilities that they use internally, Linux and Apple estates, various different types of databases and storage and CRM systems and everything along those lines, and I don't expect people will ever move purely to this cloud infrastructure side of things. I don't think that would really be anyone's goal anyway. There's always going to want to be some structure internally. But the reason that this is a security gap is if you start putting in some of those technologies, preventative parts in just the Microsoft area, yeah, sure, you've got that covered, but you're going to need to double your efforts and to cover everything else as well. Are those two areas going to be both to the same level? Are you potentially going to be buying better capabilities because you're going to a accredited third-party organization like Forcepoint for your other avenues? Does this mean you're going to end up having to do the same job twice when you're administering the security capabilities and logs from one as the other? These are all things that you would need to consider, because what you really don't want to be doing is doubling your efforts and again paying for some of the higher packages when you're going to need to buy that same technology to cover the rest of your estate. Data visibility is a big part of the conversation, especially when we are talking about cloud infrastructure. As I said, my history here was talking to people about cloud infrastructure and the benefits of that, and for a long time all the pushback was, well, I don't want my information and my data stored within your infrastructure. It's gone away over time, still does remain, still does come up reasonably often in terms of what we would be doing there, and we've got some great responses to put people's mind at rest. But immediately, once you're keeping your information in someone else's infrastructure, you want to know and have visibility on what that is. And does Office 365 offer that visibility? How detailed is its ability to scan and identify and find that data wherever it may be? There's a lot of rules and regulations that pretty much every organization has to adhere to. If you can't find personally identifiable information, it's a perfect example, that's one that's coming up a lot at the moment. If you can't find that within your infrastructure, how do you know it's secure? How do you know what people are accessing it? And that feeds very nicely onto the fourth one, just the detection capabilities. A lot of DLP solutions out there, and this isn't just an Office 365 one, a lot of DLP solutions out there are what I would classify as DLP light. I've got some more detail on this in a moment, but what I'm talking about here is probably some basic compliance templates, and maybe some regular expressions, keywords and dictionaries, but nothing much more complicated than that. The idea here is that you can kind of scratch the surface around data, but probably not get too much further than that. They certainly won't have the ability to recognize your unique intellectual property or your CRM records that have been imported from maybe another cloud solution, or do any of the really advanced capabilities around data loss. If DLP is something that is critical for you, do you necessarily want to be doing it once and building your policies in Office 365 and maybe not having them be quite as good, and then building the whole thing again to cover the rest of your infrastructure? So to continue on that part of DLP, because it is a really big part, I find is the biggest concern from customers that I've been speaking to about Office 365. I just want to talk a little bit more about that. So I mentioned just a moment ago this concept of DLP Lite. I'm not sure if it's an official term, but it's certainly one that I've heard used by lots of people, and not just Forcepoint staff. I hear it's used by customers and analysts and everyone that you would imagine that has experience here. I talked about this a second ago. What it is this whole concept of fairly basic DLP. So it will probably have some dictionaries in there. Whether they are the best dictionary that could exist out there, do they have analytics and other algorithms built into there, or are they just large dictionaries of keywords and terms that it's going to look to pick up? Regex is a very, very common one to do, and keywords as well. The sort of thing that a point solution would be able to put in to detect. The next stage from this is integrated DLP, and this is, again, that continuation on that point solution. So perhaps you're using an email filtering solution that offers email DLP. It's integrated at that gateway to make it easier for you to detect. You don't need to do any of your own integration, but it's still probably using those same fairly basic capabilities. Now, they're not all like that, by the way. I am generalizing, but it's certainly, I would say, it's probably more common than not. Moving towards the enterprise DLP, we have some other capabilities. Things like the endpoint. This can sit in either the integrated DLP camp or the enterprise DLP camp, depending on how much it is built. I've seen quite a few endpoints out there that are very, very basic, ones that have come through other technologies, rather than having the full DLP. And it really, whether the endpoint and even the gateway to a degree classifies as enterprise or that more integrated level, depends on these last three characteristics. So the capability to do discovery and the capability to do fingerprinting. So discovery is very key. You've identified something that you want to look for. You then want to know where in your organization that exists. So can I scan my OneDrive folder? Can I scan my SharePoint, regardless of whether it's on-premise or in the Office 365 cloud? Can I scan my endpoints to find this? Fingerprinting is your ability to look for your unique intellectual property. The ability to take any file or document or CRM record or anything along those lines and take an exact copy and a match of that, and even to start to learn from those so it can predict what other ones are going to look like. Cloud DLP, this is, rather than having for example, a cloud email or a cloud web solution that's doing DLP, what we're talking about more of it here is the ability to integrate with other cloud providers. So can we scan Google Drive? Can we scan anything within Office 365 environment? And the final part here is the behavioral analytics, because behavioral analytics takes it to the next level. A lot of the parts that we've been talking about right up to now sit in one of the compliance area, intellectual property protection, and data theft prevention. All can sit quite closely together. Inside of threat mitigation is something that's very, very different. It's less about the actual data that users are using, but more about what they are doing with information, where they are going, what they're downloading, what they're uploading, what changes to their system they're making. It's that next stage, that evolution from where people are looking at with DLP. So once you understand a lot of those capabilities, you can start to look at this data-centric model. And when you're looking at Office 365, this is where you want to focus yourself on. You really want to be considering the risk that you have with individual pieces, but also making it very much data-centric. Because when you no longer have a barrier, we need to work out where our new frontier is going to be. Because your frontier is no longer your firewall. So your frontier inevitably has to be your data. And this is an easy way to think about it. We can look at the who, the what, the where, the how, and what we want to do with it. So, obvious example we can have here, the HR department doing things with personal data. They're putting it on OneDrive. They're doing that over the web channel, because of course it's a cloud piece. If that is the case, what we want to do is block it. Now, it could be anything. This is just an example. Taking a different example of the same sort of thing. HR department, again accessing personal data, but this time giving it to a business partner over email. In that case, what we want to do is encrypt it. And what you can do is take this framework and adapt it to anything. Any bit of data or person or location that you are doing. And this becomes how you start to build your policies and work out what the context is and what the risk might then be from that. Something that we can expand upon. We've got a lot of experience talking around risk calculation and risk models. If that's something you want us to help out with, so if you speak with anyone like Security Partnership, they'll be able to put you in touch with Forcepoint representative, and we can go through this in a lot more detail. And I think finally on the DLP side of things, I talked when we were looking at some of the parts in the gap about the security gaps with Office 365 about what capabilities that you might need. A full enterprise DLP solution has some very advanced capabilities. So if we start with this fingerprinting, and what we can do is, as I said, fingerprint any type of information. You have to understand that exactly. But also what we can also do is then derive other information from that. So it can be context-based. So because we've seen 50 examples of patient records, we can then predict what every other one is going to look like, because they're all going to follow a pattern, but with things that differ within them. Maybe if you are an organization that builds and develops code, there's going to be repetition. There's going to be things that constantly appear in that code. We don't need to see every single latest example of that to probably be able to predict what it's going to look like at the end of this day, to be able to stop it from being leaked out, or to be able to recognize it for discovery purposes. Optical character recognition is very, very key. Anyone who's trying to beat the DLP solution, the first thing probably not the first thing, but one of the more advanced things they're going to try is just taking a screenshot of the information so that it's no longer text-based, it's a picture. To be able, if you can recognize optical character recognition, you can start to pull out lots more information. And you'd be surprised how often this comes up in accidental loss as well. People are very, very used to just going to the snipping tool and just taking a screen grab of what they've got and sending it out. I see it done all the time. Encrypted content is pretty key. So can we recognize that? Can we decrypt it in any sort of way? A full enterprise DLP solution will be able to link in often with encryption solutions. And that's either so that we can take what we've seen and decrypt it, or more often to take that as the action. If we see this information being emailed out here, or being put onto a USB drive, we need to encrypt it. And again, here we're not really talking about where it's come from. So this could have been from your local SharePoint, from a local desktop, or downloaded from the Office 365 SharePoint cloud. Really doesn't matter where the location is. We don't mind with the ability to see and scan and visibility into all. Because of a lot of our capabilities, we've got some great ideas around geolocation, so we can stop data going to specific places, but also importantly, report on where those locations are, because that can be pretty critical for organizations. Another big concept is drip DLP. This is where someone will leak out very small amounts of information over time, because they know they can send out one record at a time, because they have to do that for their job. What happens if they send out 30 in a day? If they've done all individually, it would bypass the vast majority of DLP solutions, and certainly the entry-level DLP solutions that you'll see around often. Drip DLP allows us to count over a period of time and give more context. We have some great capabilities around credential thefts. As a security organization, we're not just looking at what you've told us to block, we're also looking at things that can be indicative of you being infected with malware and proper brute force data theft capabilities. Very commonly, they're going to be after your internal credentials, which fits in very nicely with the final point on here, which is command and control. Again, if we're seeing connections going to command and control sites because we have much more visibility over lots and lots of different channels, it doesn't really matter what data is going there. We don't need you to have told us that that is your unique intellectual property and that's super secret. The fact that it's going back to that place which we know is bad allows us to protect it and block it for you. So there's a little bit of guidance that you can take aside for you when you are looking into Office 365. Firstly, very importantly, is which package is going to be right for your organization. And this is something you really want to consider, because whilst there are some security enhancements available in the more expensive packages, are you then going to end up doubling up those security capabilities to cover the rest of your infrastructure that isn't in Office 365? Is the extra cost that you'll be giving to Microsoft worth it to cover for those features? Or actually, can you get one of the smaller packages that, whilst it doesn't have those advanced features, means you don't need them? Risk modeling, really, really key here. Work out what you need to do around that, what risks are involved, and how you can actually mitigate against those. And as I said, it is something that we can offer certain advice for, mainly, of course, around the areas that we're able to protect against, which I'm coming to. DLP, I think, becomes a lot more critical when you are using Office 365, just because your infrastructure is so much more spread out than you'd be used to, and you don't have the natural barrier in place. As I mentioned earlier, your data has now become your final barrier, so understanding where it is and having controls around it becomes that much more critical, which leads perfectly into education. Probably the best thing you can do on any security plan here really is educating your users. If they understand what it is they're dealing with, they're better to do this. I think right at the very start I showed you the picture of that data center in Dublin talking about cloud. The amount of people that I've spoken to who aren't in the kind of the technical profession don't really understand what cloud is. Giving them that level of awareness does help a little bit. So these slides will be available afterwards, by the way, so you can go through these in a bit more detail. But in the interest of time, I just want to move on to some of the last few bits and then open it up to questions. So I've talked about what the actual security gaps are within Office 365 and what you might want to consider for addressing. And I've kept it, hopefully, fairly broad just to help you understand those particular terms. But of course, it makes a lot of sense for me to talk about what Forcepoint can actually offer to help you cover those gaps and which products will actually fit into place. Now, with us, it's a very modular system, so you can pick and choose which parts are relevant for you. But the one thing that is very key is that I've been talking about Office 365 a lot here. Obviously, that's the purpose of this whole webinar. But with us, that is just another location. You're not buying an Office 365 package from us. You'd be buying our email or our data or our web package. The fact that part of your infrastructure is in Office 365 is reasonably immaterial from a license perspective. Of course, we need to make sure that we've got the capability to do that integration in that. But if you're buying one of our main data licenses, then it will cover your on-premise capabilities, your Office 365 capabilities, and frankly anything else, as you'll see. So the first part is inbound and outbound protection for your online exchange. As I've mentioned, we have seen people who moved to Office 365 actually move back to these solutions because what they found is the spam and virus detection offered by Microsoft, whilst okay if you just need a tick box, certainly isn't up to scratch and certainly isn't what they've been used to experiencing. We have heard tales of some fairly significant chunks of viruses getting through. And again, when you think about the context of a malware writer knowing a lot of people are going to be using this solution and finding it easy to detect that they've got that, it becomes very easy to test against and therefore easy to target to get those advanced threats through. With our AP email solution, as well as the fact that this is a huge part of our business and we have a very vested interest in doing it very, very well, it also takes feeds in from lots and lots of other different solutions. And it's not nearly as easy for them to test against without them buying their own licenses and getting that availability, which is not nearly going to be nearly as easy. So we have cloud-based solutions that can sit neatly in front of the Office 365 hosted Exchange. There's a tick box that you select to say you're using Office 365. We have everything else plugged into it, and it does work out of the box. Whilst there's tunable capabilities to it, most people don't need to do that. They literally just turn it on and change their next records. The second side of things is our AP data license. And this is full enterprise DLP solution. This allows you to monitor and scan and have visibility over all of your data repositories, including, of course, the key one that we're talking about here, which is your Office 365. And this is all about not duplicating your efforts and having to do the same things over and over again. But it's also about making sure that we have full enterprise DLP, as I described earlier, in that environment, rather than some of the more entry-level capabilities that we've experienced up to now. We also have a full endpoint solution, so if you want to cover applications that aren't in that cloud or that are on that user's endpoint, and again, if you're moving to Office 365, you're very likely to be much more open and collaborative. Not necessarily, but that seems to be a bit more of a commonality. Having the endpoint means that users are covered wherever they are and all of their applications are as well. And then we have all of our other web and threat capabilities that of course cover your entire environment, not just what you have outside in that cloud piece. It's very important to remember that we are covering across that perspective and that we have our web piece that can sit around there. With the web piece, just a very quick part on that. If you are using web proxies and you have Office 365, really key to make sure that your web proxy isn't going to interfere with all those connections, but also that those proxies can handle the vast amount of more connections you now have going to Office 365, and it is scanning those connections. Because if you do get compromised in your 365 cloud environment, you don't want to be pulling that back into your environment. So having a good, effective top-of-the-line web proxy or web security solution, whichever form it takes, is pretty key. Because when you've suddenly seen the amount of web transactions triple overnight, because you've moved to hosted Exchange, for example, it's something that solution is going to need to be able to cater for and cope with and do quickly and easily, which is something that we can quite comfortably cater to. So the final point I wanted to leave it on is I've talked massively about Office 365, but quite a lot of these same principles work with a lot of other cloud-based tools out there, whether it's the Google ones, Salesforce, various other things out there, and there are frankly thousands of cloud applications out there. We have capabilities to work with a lot of them, certainly the very, very big ones that are out there that you will be using as collaborative tools within your business. So it's this whole thing of not needing to continuously adapt your strategy and build and buy in new tools. And also, whilst this is very unlikely, what would happen if you decided to move away from Office 365? You would have to rebuild all of these capabilities using a Forcepoint solution. It means that these policies are in place and are essentially vendor agnostic on that side. So you can mix and match and have different bits and pieces and change, but your security policies, the things that are really, really critical, will remain the same. So that concludes the presentation I've had. Hopefully that was reasonably quick and to the point. Just wanted to cover the main thing. What I'll now do is open the form up to questions. I think Dave's got control over that. So if there are any questions, if you want to put those into the chat box, we'll be on the line for the next few minutes or so, depending on how many questions there are. But aside from that, thank you very much for your listening.
Thanks very much, Chris. Yeah, I am here. We've had, certainly a couple of questions through. So the first one, Chris, I don't know if you can help with this one, which is how does the DLP capability deal with the government security classifications on various file types, i.e. I want to stop files classified as officially sensitive going into Office 365 or files that are not classified at all.
Okay, so we have quite a few things that we can do around here. If the file is tagged with any sort of metadata, brilliant, because our solution can read metadata. If it doesn't, what we can actually do is look at the specific type of information within that file. So employee information, this is a real rough example, we'll be able to recognize that with the DLP capabilities. What we can then do is build policies to say where that data can and can't reside. And so we can say that this information cannot be copied or moved to this area of the infrastructure. And that can be refined, so maybe we can have it so that only certain people can move that data to Office 365, meaning that there's going to be a level of vetting that's gone on behind that. What we can also do is discovery tasks, because it's all well and good to build policies to say this information can't go up there, but what happens if you've been using this solution for a while and it's already there and you need to find it to remove it? One of the points I touched on when I was talking about what is a feature of an enterprise DLP is this concept of discovery. Now again, metadata, us looking for the content, doesn't really matter which way we're doing it. We can be pointed to those Office 365 cloud directories, we can scan them and then we can come back with a full report to say this information exists here, what would you like to do with it? So once you have awareness of it, most likely you'll probably build a script to do something with it. So I think we've got both ends of that covered. We can find the information there if it already exists, and we can actually build policies to say that this information is not allowed to be shared with this segment of your network.
Okay, that's cool. Thanks for that, Chris. Well, I mean, we have had a couple of other questions, but actually they're very, very similar to the one you've just answered, Chris. So I think we'll just sort of give you guys sort of just another 5 or 10 seconds to see if we get anything else fired in that's different. But if we don't, I think we'll wrap it up there. And Chris, thank you very much for your time. It's greatly appreciated for you to give it up for the guys. And for everybody else, there will be a link sent around with a recording to this if you want to watch it back, and also the presentation decks will be sent around as part of that. So Chris, again, thanks very much.
No problem. Thank you very much for everybody for listening.
Cool. And yeah, thanks very much, guys. We'll now shut this down. So thank you very much, everyone.